And not just this past century, but for millennia, people have been people. And whether it was Greece or Turkey or Rome, before they were called Turkey or Greece or Rome, organizations existed. Going back thousands and thousands of years, human nature being what it is, we will always be challenged in leaders, leaders will always be challenged by the nature of human beings. So that doesn't change. Whether it's the 20th century, the 21st century, or the 35th century, doesn't change. Therefore, we have to concentrate on those things we can impact or that can make a difference. And let's start, first of all, with what I'd like to call contextual leadership. Context for a leader shapes the thinking, shapes decision-making, it shapes the ideas and the beliefs. The context in which one lives is critically important. And three aspects of context. Every context we can imagine has a technical, a political, and a cultural aspect to it. Whether you're leading the Greater Houston Partnership, Jeff, or whether you're leading the Gulen Institute, Kemal, wherever you are leading, there is a context in which you are surrounded by technical realities. The technical realities are the systems, the processes, the government, the technical realities that set the laws, that set the stage, that set the parameters, that set the financial systems in motion. These are all technical realities that a leader must cope with and must manage. Let any one of them slip, and you might slip off the legal path. Let any one of them slip, and you might fall off the financial path that you're supposed to be on. Let any one of these technical processes or technical systems slip, and you might be dealing with wrong information. So having a grasp of the technical context. Secondly, a grasp of the political context. And when I use the word political, there is the macro-political and the micro-political. We are surrounded in the institutions in which we work, in which we study, in which we play, in which we operate, by the political environment in which we live. Politics is the art of resolving conflict. And so we are living in a world in which conflict must continuously be resolved. It must be resolved. So understanding the political context in which we operate is as important as understanding the technical context. So the political is who gets what, when, where, why, and how. That's what politics does. It decides the allocation of resources. So if you're pursuing an idea, you're a student in a classroom pursuing an idea with your professor, and there are other students in the classroom who want to pursue different ideas. Politics in that classroom is about who gets what, when, where, why, and how. And so the political context and the technical context are both important. So too is the cultural context. We live in a culture that is made up of so many different beliefs, practices, customs, ideas, language, symbols. All of the cultural context in which we operate also has to be mastered, understood by a leader. So the first part of leading in the 21st century is to grasp the contextual world that one lives in. An example of not grasping the cultural, technical, or political process are in many cases failed political candidates. Why did they fail? They missed something in the perception of the candidate, in the perception of the electors. They didn't understand, they didn't grasp. I happened to meet Dennis Kucinich. Kucinich as congressman, but Dennis Kucinich as presidential candidate had big gaps in his resume in terms of the cultural, the political, and the technical context in which he was operating. He, in other words, did not create the credible set of messages that people could embrace as holistic. And so he was seen as a candidate with a particular set of interests and was seen as very parochial in his views. Other candidates are examples as well. So, moving on from the contextual aspect of the 21st century leader, which I should point out is a continuous learning process, because the politics keep changing, the culture keeps changing, people keep entering and leaving the organization, impacting the cultural context, and the technical process, Lord knows, keeps changing because of all of the things that can happen within the systems and processes in which we operate. But let's move on to the second area of importance for 21st century leaders, and that is organizational management and leadership. It's one thing to master the context. That's what surrounds us. It's something else to master the organization. My prayers go to President-elect Obama to master the organizational management of the executive branch of the United States of America. Imagine being 46 years old, never having been an executive, and now you're the chief executive of the most complex organization ever known to man, and which is not necessarily designed to work in harmony, but instead is set up of multiple branches, some of which are competing with one another. Certainly they compete for budgetary support, and the budget is the government in terms of what it can do. So the organizational management and leadership is just as important to success in the 21st century as contextual. I have every confidence that President-elect Obama grasps, as one example of a 21st century leader, the contextual world in which he has gotten himself into. He spoke of it eloquently throughout the campaign. There is just no evidence I can see that he doesn't grasp what he's up against, whether it's Gaza or whether it's AIDS in Africa, or whether it is healthcare at home. He grasps the contextual. Organizational management, three elements critical for 21st century leadership, starting with capacity. The capacity of a leader is that person's intellectual capability to make judgment, to take in fact, to separate fact from fiction, to separate myth from reality, to separate the short term from the medium term to the long term, the capacity of the mind to really get itself wrapped around what it is that must be understood in order to make judgments, in order to come to decisions. That is the first element of organizational management and leadership for 21st century leaders, capacity. And capacity is a combination of what we are born with and what we learn to know and how we learn to learn. Capacity doesn't sit still unless you turn off your mind when you stop asking questions. As long as in life you keep asking questions, your capacity continues to build because you're hearing responses. You can then decide if you agree or disagree with those responses, but you are continuing to learn because you're continuing to ask questions. Capacity is about the person's analytical and conceptual skill, which not only can deal with today, but can see tomorrow, and can see tomorrow well into the future. In the aerospace industry, they have something called over-the-horizon radar. Capacity is an individual's over-the-time horizon radar. So they can see beyond what today or next week or next month or next year looks like, and they can see the architectural possibilities of the future. On Stephanopoulos on Sunday, George Stephanopoulos said to the president-elect, "So what you're really talking about is creating a new future system of government where everybody gives so everybody can get. You're really talking about changing the tax, the governmental, and the manner in which people relate to their government, aren't you?" And he said, yes. And so I think the capacity to be an organizational manager and leader is evidenced by that architecture which this potential 21st century leader is putting forward.